Hello and welcome to Filling the Sink, a podcast from Catalan News. My name's Lorcan Doherty and today we're talking about Casa Orsola. It's a well-established business technique. Buy a block of flats in a desirable area, fix them up, hike the tenants' rents and make a lot of money. But one community of residents in Barcelona is trying to change that narrative. Casa Orsola, an apartment building in the city's Eixample neighbourhood, has become a byword for the struggle between long-term renters and their landlords. On today's podcast, we're going to be hearing from one of the residents living in Casa Orsola, a lawyer representing the building's new owners, and lots more besides. Joining me this week on Filling the Sink are Cristina, Tomàs White and Gerard Escaich Folch. Hi folks.
Hey Lorcan.
Hi, hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks. So set the scene a little bit for us here. Casa Orsola is one of these lovely old buildings that we have here in Barcelona, Cristina.
Yeah, it's not too far from the newsroom. I think it took me like 15 minutes to walk back the other day when I was there. It's on the corner of Calabria and Consell de Cent in Eixample.
Eixample is like, you know, if you see those images online of Barcelona with the grid formation,
the grid.
That's Eixample.
Well, I say corner, but it's not actually a corner,
It's not actually,
is it?
it's a cut-off corner, exactly. That's the chamfra. That
cut-off corner, right?
Yeah.
these chamfras.
Yeah, they're not perfect squares, are they, the blocks? And it's just a really beautiful, old, around 100-year-old building, pistachio-colored.
A little bit modernism style, like Catalan modernism, Art Nouveau architecture style, right?
So the building's home to 27 apartments, 27 households, and I suppose that's kind of what we're talking about, isn't it? Those apartments. What we should explain. Why are we making this podcast? What's going on in this building?
Well, in a nutshell, a bit over a year ago, a company called Lioness Inversiones bought the building for over 5 million euros, and they've been fixing it up. They haven't wanted to renew some of the contracts of the people who live in there, and essentially the people whose contracts are up, they want to stay there.
Mm-hmm. And in fact, those residents that want to stay there consider Lioness Inversiones or Lioness Investments a vulture fund, something that the company disagrees with because they say it's just a family business, a Catalan family business.
Right. But then the residents say, well, what's the difference if they end up doing exactly the same thing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's kind of in the name, isn't it? Lioness Inversiones, Lioness Investments, which is like quite literally investing money for a profit, which, you know, nothing wrong with that. But obviously they've come up against here people who have been living for decades in the same place and now are facing having to move out. Isn't that the issue?
Yeah, we have people that have been like living there for like 30, 40 years, and because some of them have indefinite contracts or rental contracts, meaning that they signed a contract between 1950s and 1985, and they get to live in the same house for their entire life until they die. Even like they get to pass on the apartment and at the same price to second more generations, so like their children or grandchildren.
Well, that's like an unbelievable contract for life, isn't it? You know, at the same price. But there's also people who have
exactly short-term contracts. Yeah. Even some people have already like their contracts are up, and others are like expecting their contracts to be up in 2024. So there are several situations. Even there are like 2 apartments who have squatters right now. So.
There's also a woman in her 80s who didn't have one of the old rental contracts, but who was allowed to stay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and there's also some flats that are already being renovated and they're being used for short-term rentals, which is kind of the idea that the new owners have, isn't it?
Right. I was talking to some of the residents, and they were telling me that the ones that they finished renovating are being rented for over 2,000 euros a month, which is a lot more than what they're paying.
Yeah, especially if you've been there for 20, 30 years. I think even at least one woman we know of that who gave birth to her children in the apartment block. It's mad.
And another thing that's interesting about this building is that even though there are some people that are allowed to stay, they've all banded together and are supporting one another in their crusade.
Okay, yeah, they've all banded together. So there have been protests then, haven't there, Gerard?
Yeah, exactly. Well, the last one was recently beginnings of November in front of Casa Orsola, where like several residents come together and like with tenants unions, who is like an organization helping them like
the
fighting
Sindicat de Llogateres.
the Sindicat de Llogateres.
It's a very kind of powerful group here in Barcelona, isn't it? That kind of supports people with housing needs and stuff. And even the mayor, Ada Colau, has got involved in this case, hasn't she?
Right. And as you guys might remember, Ada Colau was actually a prominent member of LAPA, which is an anti-eviction platform. So she does have a history as a housing rights activist. But specifically with this case, she's expressed support for the tenants.
But by getting involved, she might have got herself into a little bit of trouble, no? Or, well potentially.
Potentially, yeah, not yet. So the new owners are accusing her of defamation, breach of official duty, and coercion. And
they're talking about sooner.
Right. No, they haven't yet, but they could very, very well do so soon. And they've also received support from a business association called Foment that has accused the mayor of promoting illegal activity in reference to the squatters.
Yeah, there's 2 apartments that have squatters in it. I mean, I doubt that it's got anything to do with Cologne. But yeah.
Right, no, and the residents say that they were able to come in because the front door was broken for months, and according to the residents, the owners didn't fix it, and it was all over the press that there were empty apartments in the building, so that's how they were able to get in.
Okay. Time now to hear from some of the people involved. This week we've been speaking to María José Tarancón, a lawyer for Lioness Inversiones, Lioness Investments, Daniela Lima from the Esquerra de Eixample housing network, Enric Aragonès from the tenants union, the Sindicat de Llogateres, and first Basilis, one of the people living in Casa Orsola.
The objective for sure is to kick us out for sure. My name is Basilis. Originally I'm from Greece, and I've been living here for the last 18 years. In this building around 16 years. So I feel it like home, actually.
Basilis is one of the tenants in Casa Orsola whose rental contract has not been renewed. He still pays rent, but to an account set by a judge who will decide whether Lioness Inversiones has the right to evict him.
They don't renovate any of the contracts, and the idea was in order to make it empty and then start some of them in temporary contracts.
These empty flats give the company an opportunity to fix the building up.
El negocio de mi cliente es claro, él compra un edificio con inquilinos, ¿qué hace?
In the building, some people have fixed-term contracts, María José Tarancón, a lawyer representing the building owners, says. This is what drove her client to buy the building and rent the flats at a market rate to pay for renovations. The company is not a charity, she adds ironically.
La empresa no es una ONG.
While some of the tenants have an old rental contract, meaning they can live in the same apartment for life, paying the amount set when the contract was signed, others had fixed-term contracts which have now expired. But both groups are united in their opposition to evictions by the new landlord.
The thing is that Alberto is scared because the neighbors are all organized, they're all united in one, and this is something that he doesn't like, obviously, because...
This is Daniela Lima, spokesperson for the Esquerra de Eixample housing network, a group fighting for residents' housing rights in the Eixample neighborhood. The network, the residents of Casa Orsola and the tenants union have come together to organize protest. Enric Aragonès from the tenants union.
There's this situation of resistance of the neighbors. They don't want to leave their building and they will resist, but they are still open and we are still open to negotiation. We want a negotiation in order to have new rental contracts with the same prices or at least prices that are affordable.
But while tenants want to renegotiate with Lioness Inversiones as a group, the owners only want to tackle renewals on a case-by-case basis.
Nosotros estamos dispuestos a negociar normal.
We are open to negotiating, the lawyer María José explains, but the tenants' union is also asking other tenants not affected for their support. But we are open to negotiating in cases involving vulnerable people.
Dispuestos a negociar en el caso de que haya una persona vulnerable.
And this is actually one of the hottest issues in this conflict, as while unions and tenants claim there are vulnerable people entitled to pay a lloguer social or social rent, the company says they have no evidence of this.
There are a couple of families in a vulnerability situation, and he should offer lloguer social. He's not offering this.
Pero piensa que nosotros enviamos a todos los inquilinos.
We sent all tenants a letter to prove their vulnerability, but no one did, the lawyer says.
Los judiciales no le acreditaron ninguno.
But as Basilis says, it's not just the most vulnerable that are affected.
It can happen to anyone right now. Even though you have a job and you don't have any problem to pay your rent, with this type of businesses, right, investment funds that they want just to speculate, it can happen to anyone, and this has to stop.
Okay, well, thanks to everyone who spoke to us there. Vasilis saying that this could happen to anyone, I suppose. You know, he's been living in that building 16 years and then all of a sudden new owners and his whole life is changing.
Right. No, he was telling us that this is just an example of what he calls silent evictions, because it's not a case of not paying your mortgage or not having enough money to pay your rent. It's about being priced out whenever there's a new owner.
And he was saying that there have been negotiations, but not in writing.
Yeah, they've been a bit frustrated about this point because the owners have come to them individually, not collectively as an entire building. And what they want is to be able to negotiate, find a solution for all of the residents and not for people individually. And they've also been offered, not in writing, 30 to 50% rent hikes if they wanted to stay, which is quite a lot of money.
Yeah. We're obviously focused on Casa Orsola today, on today's podcast, but it's kind of a microcosm of a bigger picture of what's happening here in Barcelona.
Definitely. I mean, even just yesterday, I went to a different building in Pobla Sec, the neighborhood, right by Montjuic, and I was speaking to residents of Carrer Tapioles 15, and what's happening there is that their building is in the process of being bought by another investment fund who will be renovating the apartments and selling them. And they're very concerned because many of these people have month-to-month contracts now that their original contracts are up. And they're worried that they're just not going to be able to afford a rent hike, or they don't have enough money to buy.
Yeah, and the uncertainty too, of course.
So, yeah.
And I suppose it's all tied into the transformation that Barcelona is kind of undergoing, or has been for years, with the growth, massive growth in tourism and stuff. Mm-hmm. And even it's interesting, some of the measures that like Barcelona City Council has tried to introduce to make people's lives better for residents, people who live in the city, are actually having the effect of maybe encouraging gentrification because, for example, this Super Blocks project, the Super Ilha project that they have, which, makes these lovely livable streets with no traffic.
They extend the sidewalks and pedestrianize them.
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly one of the things that is happening in Eixample now, because they are planning to renew several big streets in Eixample. One of them, Consell de Cent, where Casa Orsola is, and they expect to finish construction by early 2023, so next year. And that would make neighbors' lives completely different.
Traffic-free streets and stuff, exactly. But of course that makes it very attractive.
Yeah, so a lot of the residents are concerned that of Casa Orsola, they're concerned that they're going to have to deal with the noise of the construction that's going on outside. Course, right. And once it's over, they're going to be kicked out.
Yeah.
That's definitely an element here. Not exactly applicable to the case that I was talking about in Pobla Sec, but it's more than likely encouraged real estate investment funds to make these changes in the buildings that they do own.
Well, how bad is the situation in terms of rent prices here at the minute, Gerard?
Well, considering that we said that a renovated flat in Casa Orsola can cost up to, or even more than 2,000 euros a month, just so you have an idea, that's double the amount of the average rent price here in Barcelona, which right now stands at around 980 euros a month.
And that might not seem very much to like Americans, for example. You can pay $3,000 a month just for an apartment in LA, but you just also have to keep in mind that salaries are much lower here.
True.
And in fact, the United Nations, they say that affordability for monthly expenditure for rent should be 30% the total monthly income of someone. And just so you have an idea, here in Barcelona, it represents 43%. And the metropolitan area from Barcelona, it's almost 37%, or a little bit more than 37%.
Okay, so unaffordable, according to the UN, basically.
And there are actually more evictions in Barcelona than any other city in Spain, which isn't all that surprising when you consider how much of people's income goes towards paying their rent. These evictions are mainly unpaid rent evictions, not so much mortgage evictions, which is what you used to see after the 2008 financial crisis. In any case, in Barcelona, there's an eviction once every 55 minutes.
That's incredible, isn't it? And obviously, I think we've talked about in other podcasts that the Catalan government moved to bring in a rent cap.
Yeah, no, it actually was in place for a while, but last March, in March 2022, Spain's constitutional court struck it down. They said that Catalonia had overstepped its authority. But because of this, housing rights activists and left-leaning parties, though notably not the ruling socialists, have tried to campaign for a Spain-wide rent cap law, which would essentially be modeled off of the Catalan rent cap law.
And something similar we've seen, it's not obviously a rent cap law, but like limiting rent prices. Spanish government announced a 2% cap increase when renewing new contracts. And it was in place
because every time you renew a contract, the property owners can increase it according to inflation.
And because inflation was so high these last months, they limited to 2%. And it was in place until this December, but they just extended until next year, until December 2023. So
yeah, the tenants union, who we heard from earlier, criticised that as being a false limit on increases, because they say, well, it doesn't actually happen, and when new contracts are brought in, the prices go way up anyway. And Gerard, in terms of like the type of landlords that we see in Barcelona, how does that break down?
Well, depends on who you ask. Some people say it's only people, like they have one apartment and they rent it and they go to live in another apartment. But
private landlords.
Exactly. But recently, Barcelona City Council announced that 4 in 10 flats in Barcelona are actually owned by people or entities with 10 or more properties. So we're talking about grans tenidors, as they call it here.
And also, weren't these 10 or more in the Catalan capital? So they were saying that these people could actually have even more properties.
Outside.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that, just to compare it, Barcelona only has 4% of rental apartments who are owned by public administrations, compared to that like 96%. So like that's a huge difference as well.
So there's not much public housing, basically.
Exactly.
That's much lower than the European average.
Actually, one way to solve this issue was that authorities announced that 30% of newly constructed homes should be reserved for social housing, something that Foment, the business association, said that it's paralyzing the construction industry.
Okay. Something interesting I find here is whenever you're buying or selling any property, that the government actually has first dibs, we say, like, you know, they've got the first option to buy properties.
Yeah, and actually the lawyer for Lioness Inversiones was saying that the council should have bought the building when they had the chance, and they didn't do that.
So is that okay? Yeah, they can't complain now because they had the option. But I suppose they can't buy every building that goes up on sale. And as for the future of Casa Orsola, what do we know?
Well, we don't know much right now, but these cases will be going to court in the coming months. Of course, these are individual court cases, not one big case
so
all of Casa Orsola.
Okay, well, we'll keep an eye on that and we'll keep you updated. CatalanNews.com, always, for all the information. Time now for our Catalan phrase. What's it this week, Gerard?
Posar la mà al foc.
I didn't catch that. Put
something
in the fire?
Yeah, something fire related. My hand, yeah.
Put your hand in the fire.
Yeah, exactly.
Which means
I'd swear on something.
So okay. So if you put your hand in the fire, it means you're that confident of what you're saying that you put your hand in the fire if it's not true.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically it. Posar la mà al foc.
Posar la mà al foc.
You say it about a million times faster than me, but there we go.
Oh well, you're getting better.
Thanks. Well, that's all we've got time for today. Thank you so much to everyone who spoke to us this week. Thanks to the two of you, Gerard and Cristina, for joining me.
It's always a pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
And thanks, as always, to you for listening. We're back again next Saturday with another episode of Filling the Sink. But until then, from me, Lorcan Doherty, and all of us here at Catalan News, bye for now. Adeu.